What if you only had 30 minutes to draw in Procreate? Would you actually know what to do? Because when the time is limited, it's really easy to spend half of it just thinking, adjusting things, or starting over. So in this video, I'll walk you through my simple workflow that helps me spend the time more intentionally and achieve actual results. I usually draw in the evenings after work or during the weekend, depending on how much time I have. And I've noticed that when I don't have a clear process, I'm wasting a lot of time just thinking what to draw, deciding about colors, and overthinking everything. So instead of trying to find more time, I start noticing how I'm using the time that I already have, and that made the difference in staying consistent. If you're working with limited amount of time, one thing that really helps is setting a timer. It might be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever feels realistic to you. Having that time limit gives you structure and makes it easier to stay focused because you know the clock is ticking. And instead of trying to make everything perfect, you're focusing on making progress within that time frame. Preparation is the most important part of the whole drawing workflow, so let's start with the color palettes. Instead of choosing colors when I start drawing, I prefer to prepare them beforehand. You can use tools like Adobe Color or Coolers to generate palettes. They are really helpful when you don't want to spend too much time experimenting with colors from scratch. You can quickly explore different combinations and pick something that already feels balanced and cohesive. The link to these tools is gonna be in the description box below. Or use the color harmony tools inside Procreate, for example, analogous or complementary colors. This saves a lot of time and also makes everything feel more cohesive. The second thing is to have your drawing ideas ready. I like to keep a list of drawing ideas on my phone or to save inspirations from Instagram or Pinterest whenever I see them. That way, when I sit down to draw, I already have an idea of what to draw instead of wasting 10, 15, even 20 minutes of thinking about my drawing subject. Before I start drawing, I like to look for a few references, usually 2 or 3. This helps me not to rely on one single image, but instead collect different elements from different images in order to create something that's more original at the end. In Procreate, you can use the reference option to keep these images visible while you draw, which makes the whole process much easier and faster. And here comes the sketching part. I prefer to keep things simple and I use only 6B pencil, which is under sketching category in Procreate library, and that brush is amazing for sketches and I prefer to use that for my initial idea. I keep it loose and don't overthink proportions too much. The goal here is just to build a base that I can refine later with more sketch layers if needed. When the first sketch is ready, I create a new layer and I draw on top. I refine the sketch and if needed, I can create a third layer with additional adjustments if they are needed, depending on illustration. As I've mentioned earlier, I like to work with a few references. And as you can see here, I added another one, which helps me combine elements from different images into one piece, and that makes the piece more original and, of course, flexible. I also like to set the sketch layer to multiply, so it blends better with the colors later and stays easy to see while I'm drawing. And then comes the coloring part. Before I start the actual coloring, I like to change the background color first. This helps me immediately see which colors are going to work and which are not. Then I create a new layer under my sketch layers and I start adding base colors. I always separate different colors into different layers. It keeps everything more flexible and easier to adjust later. And in order to keep things simple, I really like to rely on only one brush for coloring, and that one is under inking. It's called the drying brush. It's really nice and has some textures in it, so if you're looking for something that is more texture-like, that's the brush for you. When all the colors are ready, it comes the shadows and highlight part. I like to keep that part very minimal and I prefer to use just a light gray color for both the shadow layer and the highlight layer, and just to change the blend modes respectively for the shadows to multiply and for the highlights to screen. This way I don't have to overthink the colors and it still gives the drawing more depth. For shadows and highlights, I also like to use the 6B pencil or the Bonobo chalk brush from the sketching category. They have a really nice grainy texture, which makes everything feels a bit more natural and less flat. At the end, I usually add a layer on top of everything for adding textures or additional adjustments. This part is more intuitive, and depending on the illustrations, you might want to add those or you may just skip it. I prefer to add a few finishing touches to make the illustration feel complete. One thing that really helped me a lot was to know when to stop. If your time is up and your drawing is still not ready, try to stop at an easier part of your process, for example while coloring or shading. It makes it much easier to come back later because you're not jumping right into something complicated or some tough decisions that you have to make. This kind of workflow makes it easier to stay consistent even if you have a limited amount of time, and with time those short sessions really add up. If you're trying to fit drawing into a busy schedule too, I hope this helps. Let me know in the comments what is your drawing routine when you have a limited amount of time. Maybe there is something that I miss. I'm always curious to know. And if you find this video helpful, be sure to subscribe for more art-related videos in the future. Thank you very much for spending the time with me, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Bye!